Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Above the Bar podcast, where each week we belly up to the bar with a new guest, find out what they do, who they are, and what makes them great. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Alrighty, folks, welcome back to the Above the Bar podcast. It's your host, Sean. We've bellied back up. It's another, I don't know what's with my screen. It's another Wednesday. This is episode, so we talked about this last week, and I thought it was the right one, and I figured it out. So last week was episode 200. This is episode 201. So this is like when, if you read like Spider-Man 300 and you see the black suit, this is like the next episode after that. We figure out what happens with everything. So this is the one. So joining us today from OH10 all the way up, and look, something about it. I have to tell you about Ohio Marines in a minute, or Dr. John, and you'll know about it. But Dr. John is he's a writer, he's an actor, he's a veterinarian. He has about 75 monograms after his name, full of different. He actually has invented letters to put behind his name. It wasn't just 27. He actually came up with 28 and 29 so that he had extra letters to put behind his name. And I'm going to butcher his last name up, so we'll just see how I do with it. We have joining us from Ohio, Dr. John Bukowski.
Very, very close. Bukowski.
Is it Bukowski?
Bukowski, yes.
All right.
Yeah, I like to think I'm the most overeducated fiction writer in North America. You
could. I mean, you have a lot of letters after your name, Doc. I mean,
yeah, it's what they are is actually I skipped the. It's just funny. I don't skip the BS, but I didn't put the BS in there.
So the bachelor, right? So you got your bachelor's in science, doctors in veterinary medicine,
right?
PhD, medical doctor,
master of public health, and PhD in epidemiology. Which, thanks to COVID, many people know that epidemiology means disease detective, not skin doctor.
Well, what's more impressive about it is just the simple fact that with all that lettering behind your name, you had time to ever think about doing anything else. So, well, let's get going here. Before we get into finding out about all the books that Doc has written and what he's got going on, let's go ahead and get the bar open. So over my right shoulder, folks, as we always say, it's sticker and a cause. If you have something you support, something you believe in, maybe you have 35 different monograms after your name and you need everyone to know about what's going on and you created a sticker for each one. Reach out to me on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok, Instagram. Even our email is the Above the Bar podcast. Let me know what you got going on. I'll tell you where to send the email to or send the sticker to. We put it up on the big board and we read it for you every week. And guess what, folks? Look at them 2-0 Ravens. 2-0 Ravens. I love it. And then, as always, we got to talk about our sponsors for each week. So this week's sponsor, as always, is Budget Blinds of East Greenbush and Budget Blinds of Hudson and Cooksaki, New York. Doc, you're all, you were telling me you're all the way up in Ohio during the summer. Do you get pretty sunny where your place is? You there, Doc? John? Did I freeze? Or John froze? Oh, look at that. We lost him for a second. John, you there?
Yeah, we had a little technical difficulty.
A little bit of technical freeze up there. So,
yeah.
Back to Budget Blinds. So we'll just go ahead and shoot through it real quick. So Budget Blinds of Hudson and Cooksaki, New York, and Budget Blinds of East Greenbush is offering 25% off your entire order in the month of September. Also, on top of that, folks, they're also offering finance options through Wells Fargo Bank anywhere between 12 to 18 months at 0% interest. Just let them know you're there to belly up to the bar, and they'll be sure to help you out. All right, Doc, all that's done. It's all said and done. Let's get into I've got to get your backstory first. I got to get a little bit about this backstory. So, I mean, being a veterinary doctor, that's a lot of education to start with.
Yeah.
Then to go into the public health side and medical doctory, like humans, that's a whole nother bunch of schooling. How long were you in the medical? Let me know. Let's start with that. Like, how do you go from one to the other, and which was first? Like, what's a little backstory on you?
Sure. I have a different kind of background for a fiction writer, as you can see. I started in school with a great love of reading, so that's my foundation. I spent many a summer in the library reading books, primarily because I love to read and partly because it's air conditioned. We didn't have air conditioning, and I grew up in Detroit, and but I started focusing probably in high school. I loved my English classes. I loved history, but I started focusing on science, fascinated by science. And so I went for a bachelor's of science in biology at Wayne State University back in Detroit, and set my sights on a veterinary degree. So several years of veterinary school later, I was in practice in Southeast Michigan. Liked it well enough, but I got to the point where I really didn't like the life and death decisions, which you do a lot of in veterinary medicine, between the euthanasia and surgeries and things like that. And started thinking about taking my science training in another direction, go become a disease detective, figure out why diseases happen and where they're happening more. And that's when I started pursuing epidemiology, which is what that means, disease detective. Doesn't mean skin doctor. It doesn't mean bug doctor. I've gotten them all. Doesn't mean a guy who studies language. It means disease detective, essentially, patterns of diseases and populations. And got my master's and then my PhD, MPH, that's for Masters of Public Health. And did that for about 15 years in industry and government, and spent a little time in Canada heading up a clinical research center on Prince Edward Island. Oh. And so did a few different things. But one thing I noticed that as I was going through my career and the people I was working for, I was doing less and less research and more writing. They liked my writing and I enjoyed writing. So this kind of gets me back to my love of writing and reading. And so I did more and more of that. And then around early 2000s, around 2004, I think it was, I was working at a corporation and I left there to become a freelance medical writer. So then I became a writer full-time, as it were, for about a 10-year period, 10, 12-year period, where I was writing journal articles and website content and thing they call in trade advertorials, some radio scripts, things like that.
Oh, wow.
Handbooks for the public, lay handbooks. And anybody who's ever done any writing and is working as a writer, no matter what it is, wants to write the great American novel.
Sure.
And I was no exception. And so I'm plugging along doing my medical writing, and the Great Recession hit, 2008, 2009. Nobody wanted to spend any money. None of the businesses I was working for were doing that. You know, they weren't spending money on contractors. They were tucked in. So I had time. My wife, fortunately, was working, but I had the gift of time. So I said, you know, you want to write a novel, now's the time to try it. So over about a 6-8 month period, I did write one, a thriller novel called No Good Deed, which is still on my computer and may never see the light of day. Who knows?
Really?
Yeah. That's Stephen King calls them trunk novels. Back he used to work with paper. You know, you write something and you don't think it's good enough to get published, so you just kind of put it in the trunk. But it got me hooked. Business started picking up, and I still kept my hand in. I started working on another novel, started writing some short stories and submitting to magazines and story collections. And around 2016, I guess it was, I said, you know what? I now have the gift of time again because I've accumulated enough through my other efforts that I can now do writing, fiction writing full time. And it wasn't until last year that I got my first one published. And that was Project Suicide. And I'll show you the cover. You should be able to see that.
I can see the cover. I like the artwork on it.
Yeah, we did. The publisher did a good job with that. And then I came out with my second one this year, which was Checkout Time, and going from there.
So you've had kind of an interesting journey to get where you're at now. You brought up like hearing your journey reminded me of a conversation I actually had today, where I was on a coaching call with my old master guns. He runs a program called Chaos Coaching, and we were talking. And one of the people on the call, it's like, hey, write down one of your dreams, your life dreams, your 10-year goal. And the woman goes, oh, I want to write a novel. I've got a novel sitting on my computer. I'm 6 chapters into it. Haven't touched it in years. And I thought about it, how many people I can think of that say, oh, well, I want to write a book, or I want to open a restaurant, or I want to learn an instrument. And what do you think it is for people that, just like yourself, that they kind of go, I have a creativity piece that I haven't explored that I need to share with people? Because I think all that, whether it's cooking, writing, any of that stuff, that's creativity.
Sure.
What do you think it is that people have that creativity gene that they want to share with people, and why?
I don't know. I think you're right. As many people want, I break writers up into groups. There's the people who say, I want to write a novel, and they never do. Then there's the people who say, I've started writing a novel, or oftentimes started writing many novels, because the beginning of a novel is always the easiest. Beginning and end are relatively easy. It's the middle that's tough. And then there's the people who actually complete it. And then there's people who complete it and get it published. So, it's winnowing through the whole process. And I think the main thing about it, I mean, certainly you have to have a creative drive. I've also done stage acting in community theater and a little regional theater. And you have to have that drive, that creative drive, that need to, in the case of novel writing, tell a story. And the second part of it is just consistency and stick to it. It's just like when I was working on my PhD, it's a huge project. Your dissertation is huge. It's overwhelming if you think about it like that, but you're working a little on it every day. And writing a novel is not like a lot of people think. You go away to a cabin in the woods for 2 or 3 weeks and you come back with a book. Maybe somebody does it that way, but most people I know, myself included, every day you write 500, 600, 1,500 words, depending on what your word count is, or how quickly you write, or how creative you feel that day. And you do it every day, or try to do it every day. And over a period of 3, 6, 8, 10 months, you've got at least a first draft of a book, which then has to go through several drafts as you polish it before it even gets to an editor to polish it.
Well, that's something. Hold on, I want to pause you for a second there, John.
Sure.
Because you bring up the point of the editing and all that. What was that? You write. Obviously, you said you had your trunk book.
Right.
You got that one that'll never see the light of day.
A few of those, yeah.
Oh, okay. So a few of those, but you get to that first book. That, folks, and if you're looking for what John's got out there, you can go to thrillerjohnb.net, and it's just like it sounds. Thriller, John, John, the letter B.net, and you can see what John's got going on. But what was that like when you finally whittled it down to where you felt like, okay, I'm done at this point, and you hand it to that editor, and then they begin to butcher what you think is great? How did you approach that?
Well, the revision problem for the author, or the revision process for the author, is you get your first draft, then you let it sit, because you don't want to start revising it right away. You're going to miss a lot of things because it's too familiar. So you let it sit for 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then you do a second revision and you tighten and you say, boy, this doesn't seem to work. This slows down the plot, whatever. And you work and you tighten, and you maybe do 3 or 4 of these. And in this process, you might send it to a couple of friend writers or people you trust as readers and say, give me some feedback. did it hold your attention? Did you notice obvious plot holes or continuity problems? You know, the eyes were blue here and later on they're brown, things like that. And they give you feedback. You take what you think is important out of that. And then it finally goes to the editor. Now, I always think that working with an editor, in my case, it was an editor over at Pathfinder Press, where I was published. It's kind of like working with a physical therapist. You both love them and you hate them because they're helping you, but at the same time, they're telling you some of your stuff doesn't work. And so it's a painful process, but God bless them, because you can never see it the way the reader's going to see it because you wrote it. It's in your head. You fill in the blanks. You know what the movie looks like, and you're trying to describe it to other people in an entertaining way. And that's where the editors really come in. They say, you know, this is a beautiful piece of writing, but it slows the plot down, or it makes your character look bad or whatever. And you consider it, you don't take it all, but in my case with Doug, I took, I'd say 85% of it. When you've got a good editor, that's what happens. You learn to trust them.
It has to be a comfort level.
Yeah. And so, yeah, then it goes, you know, there's certainly the final, what they used to call page proofs and stuff like that, where you and the editor and the publisher are all looking through it, looking for problems before it goes to press. And that whole process, from the time that you sit down to write until it's actually a book, is probably about 2 years.
You know what? You say it's 2 years, but then I think about some of these writers that are out there. Like, I used to read a lot of Dean R. Koontz myself back when he still had an R in the middle of his name.
Right.
And he, you know, he felt like he was cranking out books all the time. Now, you got a quick question here from another Marine, just retired friend of mine. He says, how do you think the writing process could be applied to writing college courses? The turn-in process is so short, you don't get the option to give the pause you just mentioned. So he's talking about like doing college papers, and they're like, hey, I need 7 pages by the end of this week, and it's already Tuesday.
Right. Well, that's a whole different kettle of fish. That's more like writing short stories, where you can crank out a first draft in a few days. You know, it's only 3,000 words. You know, a novel's 90,000 words. And they're trying to basically teach you how to write by having you write. Because there's 2 things. You want to be a fiction writer, there's 2 things you got to do. You got to read a lot of fiction, preferably fiction in the genre you like to write in. I hear people say, I don't have time to read. It's like, well, then you're not going to be a very good writer. You're not going to learn anything, because it's like trying to build a house without having blueprints or without reading a manual on how to do it. Good authors that are published, they give you that. You learn over years what good writing looks like. And the other thing you got to do is you got to write a lot. You know, so that's one of the things college writing courses do, is they get you writing. They force you to write, because, as you say, you know, you haven't worked on your novel in years.
Yeah, no, but listen to me. In my head, John,
I'm not criticizing.
It's the most amazing 3-book series that I've played in my head over and over. It's so great. And I got to tell you, George is from Tennessee also. You know, just so you know, George is originally from Tennessee. So, you know, if you need any, I know you said you got your summer or your winter house there. Yeah. He might be able to give you some Tennessee information.
Wow,
you know, good. But it's just so interesting to me that, you know, now everybody talks about writing styles, you know, who influence you. And I can tell you, like, from deploying in the services in the Marine Corps, I read a lot of Koontz, like I said, read King. And then I got into, I can't think of his name right now, the guy who wrote the Last Kingdom series that was on Netflix.
Not George Martin.
No, not George R. Martin. This one, actually, if you love good writing, that whole series on Netflix called The Last Kingdom is about the real historical events of how England becomes Britain
Oh,
and
okay. Yeah.
gets combined. But what the guy did was he took real, true historical events and he created his own character named Uhtred of Bedinburgh and added him into all the stories,
Historical fiction. Yeah.
historical fiction, and made his character into kind of the catalyst that drove everything. Like he was the real thing that was happening and nobody knew he was there. And then, but at the end of all his books, he puts about, I guess he probably puts a good 5 to 10 pages at the end of the book of the real historical events of what truly, truly happened, where this person died or how this person came into power.
Sure.
He's a great writer, but those are the people that like I read and sparked my imagination. And I come from that born in 76, 80s, early 80s sci-fi. I love all that stuff. You
Right.
know, there's always a government in my mind. There's always a government organization that is behind everything, that's running everything from the shadows that you don't know about. Like I love that stuff. Like the CIA is
That's a lot
nothing.
of Project Suicide. Yeah.
Yeah. So what were some of the, obviously you look like you're probably maybe a year or two younger than me. So I don't know what influenced your writing, but what were some of,
Actually, I was born in 56.
okay. So gosh, so you're 20 years older than me. So, we're right there. We're right there. But what are some of the folks that you took from, because you do come from a generation that I always feel like I feel like there's like this big skip in reading where like you come from a generation of readers, then there's this generation that wasn't really big into it, and then like my children are all readers, like Harry Potter.
Right.
I got introduced to the Scythe series recently. We've talked about like these book series is for young readers. What were some of the writers that you were influenced by, and do you see them in your writing?
Right. Well, at least my first two novels are kind of techno thrillers. So Michael Crichton comes in there. Um, but I would say my big three of influences was, first of all, Ernest Hemingway. He's the man who really defined how you do a novel in the 20th century, uh, American novels anyway. He's the man in that respect.
Absolutely.
Second one is Stephen King. I think you learn more about characters and how to write them so that people like them from Stephen King than just about anybody. And the third one is Elmore Leonard. If you want to learn dialogue, he wrote Get
Westerns.
Shorty. He wrote a bunch of Westerns. He wrote Get Shorty. He wrote Justified, that series that came out just before it came out a couple years before.
I love.
Yeah.
So listen,
Raylan.
Timothy Oliphant.
Yeah.
Is
that was
Raylan Givens.
Yeah, that's a Leonard character.
That's he has a new
yes.
There's a new I only watched the first episode of it, and I want to catch up on it because but I don't know, like the new villain in that one.
I haven't seen it yet.
So they won another version of of Boyd Crowder.
Right.
He's not really the actor who played Boyd is probably to me one of the most diverse character actors. Because
Wade Goggins.
Yes. Well, he played a transvestite hooker in what's the Sons of Anarchy.
Okay.
Then he's on Veep as the vice principal in that show on HBO, which was a comedy.
Right.
He like the type of, and then he had he had a TV series. I don't know if the TV series is gone now, where he was a single dad where he was more concerned about raising his kids than he was getting back out into the dating world after his wife died. And the show was all about his friends trying to push him that way. He is just him and Timothy Oliphant together.
They worked well together. Both very good actors. I would really agree with you on that. And that's one of the keys if you want to write a good villain, a memorable villain that people love to hate. They have to be interesting. They can't be a Snidely Whiplash kind of villain or just plain evil. Because as they say, no villain in whether it's in a theatrical production, a movie, or in a novel thinks of themselves as evil.
No.
They're all doing what they think is good for themselves, for
For humanity.
Right. Even Hannibal Lecter, and there's an example of
Yeah.
a great villain who's very entertaining. The evil is always just below the surface, underneath his charm. And you could say the same thing about Boyd Crowder.
Absolutely.
He's so eloquent and so funny and so personable, and then he shoots somebody in the back of the head.
Right. Like it was like I told you what was going to happen. I let you know how this was going to go.
Right.
All I asked of you was to do this one thing, and you just couldn't do it. So I'm just going to shoot you now.
Right.
Be done with it. Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely.
So yeah, that is one of the keys, I think, to writing a good villain, is to have them be interesting, have people want to get into their heads, and what are they about?
You have to hate them. So I always, so obviously I still love TV. Did you watch the new Lost in Space on Netflix?
I remember the old one from the 60s.
So the old one, Dr. Smith wasn't so hateable.
He was just a bumbler. Yeah.
Yeah, he was very bumbling. He's like, "Oh, we're gonna go this way."
A pompous bumbler. Yeah.
Right. Well, if you can get a chance to watch the new one on Netflix, and I don't know if you watch any Netflix, John, but they have Dr. Smith as a woman in this. It's a female actress, and she's an amazing actress to start with. I can't think of her name right now. Nate will send it to me in a minute, but she does such an amazing job of how she plays Dr. Smith that I hate her in the most loving way. As a person, she's probably a great person. Right. But her character of Dr. Smith, you just want to hate. So when you talk about, you have to make your character that interesting that your reader hates it. How do you draw that, like, in your life experiences? And I don't need you to be like, look, my first boss when I worked at the roller rink, but you can. He's probably gone by now. But what do you draw from, or is there a particular, like, hey, you were in epidemiology. I know that, hey, this was the person that this, and, this was the name of the disease, and this is how I associate this. Is there anything along those lines that you were able to draw from to make that villain for you? Oh, John locked up on us. We had him. He froze on us. I think that's such an amazing question just now that our guest was completely taken back and froze completely up on this. So, folks, while we're waiting for John to come back, if Nate's still hanging out there, Nate and I are working on another episode of After the Lights Go Out for the Above the Bar podcast. That'll be, hopefully we're doing it on the 30th. John just had to pop off. He'll be right back, but hopefully we're doing that one on the 30th. While we're waiting for the good man, the good doctor to come back here, let me ask this question. What are some of the characters that, from books that everybody's read that maybe you absolutely just despise and you feel like they were written so well that I'm super excited too, Nate. You have to let me know. I sent you a text. You didn't get back to me. But you were written so well. Like, my son introduced me to this Scythe series I've talked about a couple of times here recently. And the villain in this, the name was Goddard, and based on the doctor, the scientist Goddard, because all these characters, and he was just, everything about him was just arrogant and pompous, but he always had this feel of a psychopath that didn't know he was, because of the world they lived in. That wasn't a terminology. Nobody would be like that. So is there any characters that others think they're like, hey man, this particular one just really always got to me, or always was the one that, really got under my skin? Like I said, Dr. Smith was an amazing one for me on TV. Boyd Crowder's one that, like, you would love. Like, he was almost like a Negan in The Walking Dead. I still firmly believe that if they would have written Walking Dead the book series, instead of Rick being the initial person that they created to go through the series to be the main kind of linchpin for everything. If you would have been introduced to Negan at the beginning, I think most of us would have felt like Rick and them were the bad guys. And, to me, that's a great villain. Somebody that you don't realize who they are, who the villain is at that time. So hopefully the good doctor will be back with us here in a moment. I'm hoping everything's doing all right for him. Also, as we're thinking about it, as things are going along here, I have to recommend to everyone, when you get a chance, make sure that you check out the Outlaws podcast. That is our good friends over uh, George, another George, uh, George and Highland. Check out their show. I don't know if we're gonna get the good doctor back here, folks. We'll see here. Um, we're running into that moment where normally most people make it back by now. Hopefully his internet didn't go completely poo poo. He's in Ohio, so you never know with those guys. But you know how this works. If he doesn't come back, I'm gonna find out which one of y'all are still out there listening along with us, and then I'm gonna have one of you guys come on and join us, and then that's how we're gonna finish this off. Uh, is there anybody else writing a book? Because that's what we're doing today. We're talking about writers. So we seem to have lost the doctor. I don't know if he's gonna make it back or not. Um, yeah, I don't know, and I don't have a phone number. This is what live. If anyone ever thought that they could do live TV or live anything, this is live. This is what live looks like. You just accept when things don't happen the way you thought they were, and you run with it, and you make it happen. And I still got 27 minutes and 45 seconds worth of show. So I hope everybody's enjoying themselves. Nate, George, are you still out there, George? Let me know if you're out there. You or Nate. Let's see who else is out there. There's 4 of you watching. One, somebody's coming on. Because I'm not good just talking by myself. Because the next thing you know, we're gonna be talking sports or something. All right, George, here you go. Uh, keep an eye out on your Facebook Messenger. Because enter name George Peevler. Send. There you go, George. Go look at your Facebook Messenger. So my partial novel, I will tell you about it. So I actually wanted to write a 3-book series because I don't know why all series for books have to be 3, but it actually was based on, if you've ever heard of the Seneca white deer here in New York, it's a Bract Army base, or Bract Army base. Bract was the Base Relocation and Closure Act. Another one of those Clinton genius moves, just killing small towns. But it was that base was also, they held nuclear weapons there and all kinds of stuff. But my book was, I went hunting out there because they had these Seneca white deer. They're all white deer. They're not albino. And I was like sitting on, they're called magazines. They're concrete buildings. They have grass all over them. And I was sitting there and thinking to myself, because connected to this place is what's called 5-Star Prison, which is New York State's most maximum security facility. Like that's where they keep. There's a serial killer called the Eggman and some other folks. That's where they keep them at, is up there. So I thought about it, and like I said earlier on, the deer did not hunt for me, Nate. But I thought about it. I was like, man, this would be an interesting place because you couldn't drive back or walk back to your hunting spot. Before we started hunting, they put us all in the bed of a pickup truck and drove us to our individual magazines and left you there. And at the end of the hunt, they just came and got you. There really wasn't any way to call for help if there was an emergency. You just had to kind of know where everybody was at. So I thought about it, and again, I love government conspiracy stuff, and I love uh, heavy sci-fi. So my thought was, imagine if underneath of this place, like through a door of one of these magazines, there was a facility that the government was testing, not like space stuff, but paranormal theories. Like if somebody said, "Oh, hey, this is what the chupacabra is," and they had chupacabras there, or you know, we've all heard of werewolves and all these different things, and they had them housed there. And what they would do is they would tell the prisoners, "Hey, we'll commute your sentence, but you got to let us, do some testing on you, some paranormal testing. When it's done, if nothing happened, you'll go free. If something did happen, then we know what the deal is, but we'll address it and we'll take care of you." And within there, it was going to be everything was set up in teams of two. So they would have one person who was just a straight up, not necessarily James Bond, but more of like a Jason Bourne, hand to hand combat, weapons expert kind of person. And they would always be paired with somebody of a paranormal nature, whether they be a Native American shaman or a medicine man from some tribe in the South in South America, but they would always be paired. So my story was that a book that I wrote, like I said, most of it is just about how this one thing called the umbra, and all it was a dot of black liquid that when it would feed on people's paranoia and anxiety. And once it got into but it only could get in through your eye. So it made it more difficult. But so they had captured it and they were trying to test it and they put it in this guy's eye. And this guy was a horrible person. He was in jail for rape, murdered his father. He was always a bad apple, all these things. And they put it in his eye and it wasn't working because the Umbra knew, because it was actually a life form that had fallen to Earth uh, long ago and was able to just kind of keep jumping host to host, and it was in his eye, and it wasn't working. It wasn't doing nothing to him because the Umbra knew what it was doing and knew that if it didn't react, they would just think that it was nothing to it. Well, it waits until there's a situation and the doors aren't closed right. They think there's nothing going on, and it does what it does, which is start feeding on this guy's uh, kind of like a little bit like a venom. Yeah, George, a little bit like a venom. I never actually put that together, but yes, but without the whole suit, like it didn't go all over your body. It's just in your eye. But once it activated, its whole thing was to cause you to live through your most damaging and anxious feeling memories consciously, constantly, because that's what it was feeding on. That was its energy source, its life force. And because of this, it causes this guy to lose his mind and escape. But when he does, he also kicks open multiple cells within this facility. So that was also what was going to feed to the other two books, because you were going to find out how the werewolf with a PhD got out, how the real chupacabras got out, and all these things along those lines. And but he gets out into the woods where these guys are out hunting. It's that same facility, and they're out hunting. And because the alarms are going off, um, the truck that was supposed to get them never comes. And there's these uh, four hunters sitting out there, and the one is a gentleman's son who he has Asperger's, and he's very high functioning. Hunting's not a problem, but it's just more social and emotional type stuff. And the book is just about them surviving because now the Umbra is has caught up with them. And now, George, you're gonna have to wait because John's back, so I can't. You have to wait to hear more about my book when I have a chance to tell you more about it.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. My
That's all
internet
right.
just went down. I don't know why.
It happens, but well, George asked, my buddy George Peevler asked about my book next time. But I'll tell you, George, it's a 3-book series. You'd love how my whole werewolf thing was completely a departure from anything that had been out there. Basically, werewolf children were raised by their fathers who were always single dads. And it was a very, it was lycanthropy was more of an ailment than it was anything. So, but back to my question for you, John, if you didn't catch the whole thing, which was, how do you draw your information? Look at that. You see how I do that, folks? I just run right back into it.
Right.
I don't
Right.
miss a beat. But what do you draw from, or what are the characters that you pull from when you're making that your villain to make them into that, either lovably hateful character?
Right. Well, that's the thing. Characters, it's like being an actor, and I apologize, I'm on my phone, so it's
fine.
But they're like with an actor, they're drawn from you, through you. So some of it is you, some of it is people you know, some of it is composites of people you know, some of it is people you've seen on TV and movies. There's I remember seeing, I don't remember the author's name, but a relatively well-known author speak at Thriller Fest in New York a few years ago. And he said that he never describes a bar room or an office to any great degree because people know what they look like.
Right.
So the same thing, you can use what people have seen in movies and TV and play off of that as well. So characters can come from everywhere. They come from your own life. They come from characters you've read or seen in movies. And you take bits and pieces of those with the idea of, what makes them interesting to you. And writing is always a very specific thing. You hope it's generalizable, but you can't write for everybody. You have to write for you and what you think is interesting, what you like. And hopefully that will be generalizable to enough readers that it will be kind of universal.
So now, let me ask this one then. Is there any person, whether political, I don't care what it is, that you like, this is always where your framework starts for those characters? Also your hero characters. Every good villain needs a good hero.
Right.
Like, is there somebody that you say, I start them, here's my framework, and then I build it off of this?
Not so much. Like I said, it's like with acting. I always come back to that because you're bringing it all through you. Just like in acting, you've seen other people, you've built the character based on many different things, but it all comes through you and your emotions and your thoughts and what you thought of other people that you've seen, or what we're authors are like actors, and we're good people watchers. We like to see how people behave in restaurants and what have you. And you can use bits and pieces of that, good and bad, in your writing. So for me, at least, it's no one thing. It's a composite. The characters, in some cases, the characters kind of spring the last book I wrote, Checkout Time, both the villain and my heroes, and there's really kind of two heroes. There's my scientist hero, and then my FBI lady hero, and they all kind of sprang just almost full formed. You can hear them talk in your head, and they go back and forth, and it's larger part of imagination.
So we're getting close. We're getting close to that closing time at the bar here, John. So I want to make sure I get into everything now.
I missed 10 minutes of it. Yeah,
that's all right. You know what? If you when you go back and listen to it, you'll get 10 minutes of my book.
Okay, great.
You get like 10 minutes of what my book is. I'm waiting for George or Nate to tell me, the whole idea of it sounds okay or it sucks, and I expect truths from both of them. But how much of like you said, epidemiology, investigation, seeing how things come from. When you write, do you draw from that investigative process? Like, I know some writers, they write about things that there's like, what's his name? Not Crichton, but Michael, is it Lincoln Lawyer, Colton?
Oh, Lincoln Lawyer. I'm trying to think. I can't. I'm drawing a
It's
blank.
Michael something. Michael Conley. Conley.
Conley, yes.
So, if you read Michael Conley's stuff, he was a journalist,
right?
Investigative journalist. So he uses a lot of that investigative skills to add to his books, that investigative process. But he was into crime
Right.
writing in the newspaper and just fed it over. I heard The Scientist, in your book. So how much of that are you drawing from when writing?
Well, there's the old saying, write what you know. And the reason for that is that every book has a certain amount of research. I teach a workshop on research. I just taught it in Louisville this past summer. And every book has some research in it. And you want to have enough that you draw the reader in without boring them. So the idea of write what you know is it's going to be a whole lot more realistic if I write about science and medicine than if I write about aircraft maintenance. Now it doesn't mean a plumber can't write a book about lawyers. He's just got to do a lot more research. So yes, some of that is in my books, especially, like I said, they're techno thrillers. So there's a little technical material, but it's there to make you feel like you're behind the scenes. You're looking at how this is really done. And it sounds plausible. And it sounds a little bit technical, and it's enough to draw you in. It's like being a good con man. A con man doesn't start off with, would you like to buy the Brooklyn Bridge? They start off giving you all kinds of realistic things where people are talking to them about finance and stuff. They get you involved. Then they slip in the bullshit, if you mind me saying that.
You're good. Yes. You're perfectly good. That's probably the least thing that's ever been said.
And that's what you try to do with writing, especially a techno thriller or historical fiction or something. Historical fiction, you have to do enough research to make it, the people who know history are going to say, that's plausible, that makes sense, I'm going to buy into it. I'm going to suspend my disbelief, and then I'll go along.
I think George is directing this recruiter comment at me, because that's what we did as Marine Corps recruiters. We gave you just enough information about how great things were going to be, and then let me slip my bullshit in there.
Well, that's what I always liked about Michael Crichton's writing, and Robin Cook to a certain extent, is they made you feel you were behind the scenes in the investigation of a new bug or building a dinosaur or whatever. But it's still fiction. They're still making stuff up, but they start off by getting you in the mindset you're going to believe.
Right. Like this could happen.
Yeah.
And guess what? You did hear that, like, they say that by 2024 we'll have woolly mammoths back.
Right.
Did you see that?
I've not seen that, but
yeah, look into that one. They figured out how to use DNA and get it all back. Robert said he had a great recruiter. That's because, look, Robert, that's because you were in the Army. Listen to me. Your recruiter was probably like you and him went to the bar, had a couple packs of cigarettes. As a recruiter, we just nothing like that. We abuse them. Like, you suck.
Well,
no one likes you.
Here's a good example. In Project Suicide, my first novel, it's a story about how a cure for Alzheimer's disease is perverted into an assassination drug. And there's some genetics in it. And some of the genetics about Alzheimer's is true. And some of the stuff I have is BS about Alzheimer's, and about I invent a gene called a survivability gene or a longevity. I think I forget what I called it exactly, but a gene for self-preservation, so that when you give the cure for Alzheimer's, it also binds to this self-preservation gene. And as your sense of self comes back, you lose your sense of self-preservation and you commit suicide.
Oh.
So that's why it's a great assassination drug, because you give it to somebody and they kill themselves. And like I said, there's a certain amount that's real, and I have the background where I can make it sound plausible. And then when I feed in the stuff that's not real, it still sounds plausible.
and that gets people to take the ride.
I like it.
Get on
So
the roller coaster.
Now you have the 2 books. Is there a third coming? And again, folks, if you want to know what John's got going on, it's Thriller, THRILLER, John, JOHN, the letter B.net, thrillerjohnb.net. And is there another one coming? You know, we're gonna have a series.
I'm working on a sequel to Project Suicide. I'm about 3/4 of the way through that. I'm also working on a couple other books. Like I said, when you get pauses in these books, you work on something else because you do it every day. But yeah, Project Suicide is out there. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any of those things. Same with Checkout Time. Easiest way to get to them, projectsuicidenovel.com. Checkouttimenovel.com takes you directly to Amazon. And so yeah, I'm working on some other books. Stay tuned.
Now, are they all? I know those 2 are thrillers, like you said, the techno thrillers. Is that the genre we're staying with, or are you going to make a left turn into like all of a sudden the next one's a cookbook or something?
Well, I've got another one that I've completed, and I'm started to pitch it. I don't know where it's going to go, but it's more of a I would call it Lifetime movie kind of novel. You know,
you wrote a rom-com?
Not quite romantic comedy, but it's more chick lit.
Okay.
It's about a man who is about my age, who's never had children, and his wife dies, and now he wants a child. And it intersects with a girl in the community and a parish priest, and intrigue back and forth, a stalker, a cop that the girl becomes involved with. There's a whole bunch going on, but it's not really a thriller.
I mean, interesting. I was going to say, like, you could have really taken a left turn with that. And now he wants a child. So he's been going around the town, kidnapping all the children and hiding them under his steps. And no one can find them. No one knows. Where will they be next?
That's another way to take it. See, and that's the thing with writing. It's the great what if. You know, when I was working on Checkout Time, which is about a extortion bomber trying to extort money from hotel chains by bombing hotels. And when I first came up with the idea, I was in a hotel. I looked at the ceiling. There was a trap door. And I said, wow, you could put anything up there. What could you put up there? You could put microfilm, and then you've got a political espionage thriller. You could put, what if you put mob money up there? Well, then you've got a whole other type of thriller. I went with a bomb. And, well, if you got a bomb, why is he putting the bomb up there? Well, I came up with extortion. So it's all the what ifs, and the what if leads to what if, what leads to what if. And that's the great thing is Stephen King, in his book and movie, The Dark Half, he says that everybody has 2 selves or multiple selves, but they hide most of them. The fiction writer doesn't hide them. The fiction writer lets them come out and explore. And if you don't do that, your writing sounds stilted. You know, it's like reading a textbook or something.
I love it, John. I mean, just see, and I love the imagination there. I think I was always that kid.
Yeah. Well, kids are great with that. Kids play. I used to play soldier as a kid, and cowboy, and all those things, gangster, whatever. And kids are great like that. We kind of lose some of that when we get older. Fiction writer doesn't have to.
Yeah, for me, I was ruined by George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. Not Night of the Living Dead, but Dawn of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead, yeah.
Yeah, Dawn of the Dead ruined me as a kid, and it just got my mind going. and I still, to this day, I think that's why I have like I have like bug out bags and stuff like that. It's not, no one's invading. I'm not worried about that. It's the zombies I'm worried about.
Zombies is one thing I can't. Zombie apocalypse is one thing I can't get into, because they never sell it as from a science fiction point of view. It's totally impossible. Dead tissue cannot be animated that way. I mean, a whole process goes on when things die. You've smelled something that's been dead for more than an hour or two, But if they sold it as magic, and then I can buy it, zombies from voodoo rising from the grave. But they try to sell it as a virus or something. I can't buy that.
Well, The Walking Dead does it as it was a infection,
right,
given to the whole planet, like released, and nobody knows how it came, because they had the CDC in season 1, and they were trying to figure out what was going out.
Yeah, whenever they try to sell it as an infection or something, I can't buy it. I know too much medicine.
See, those things. For me, I'm sold. But see, that's the difference between, like, I like Star Wars. My best friend likes Star Trek. Star Wars, the science folks are like, nothing in Star Wars works. Nothing whatsoever works. And then, but all the science people are like, Star Trek is amazing. Everything, there's some semblance of reality that could happen here. They worked on it. I like Star Wars. I like it.
Did you ever see the Family Guy version of Star Wars with Stewie? And they talk about the Death Star. Well, there's one little design flaw, but it's really hardly mentionable. It's like, the planet blows up. He goes, whoa, whoa, whoa.
I love it. Well, look, folks, we got to get ready to let the doc get back to all of his writing, making things happen so we all have stuff to read. Again, make sure you're checking out thrillerjohnb.net. You're seeing what he's got going on, seeing what's happening in his world. We've got the 2 books out there. Check out Time and
Project Suicide.
Project Suicide. I almost said Painkiller. Project Suicide. Make sure you're checking them out. They're on Amazon. Any audio versions? Yay? Nay?
No, not at this time. No.
All right, no audio version.
Kindle, hardcover, and paperback.
So make sure you're taking the time. And look, if you've got a book of your own, dust it off. See what you got going on there. Every time I get a writer on here, they always tell me, take a moment, man. Write a page a day. Do something.
Yeah.
I've gone back and I've read what I wrote. I don't want to do the rewrite. Just so you know, I don't want to do the rewrite. I've had people read it and they're like, you do realize it. You got some flow issues here. And I'm like, then you fix it. I've already seen the movie. It's all in here.
You know what they say? You don't really get to the writing until you're revising.
Oh, yes.
That's the real writing.
I would have to hire somebody to revise it, to do all that for me, because it's all in here. And once it's out, it's done. That's me. But look, folks, we're never done here at the Above the Bar podcast. We got another show next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As I say every week, if you found me through John or John, if you found me through John or John through me, make sure you're taking a minute, figure out whatever social media you're checking us out on. Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all those different places. Give a like, follow, share. You may sound cliche, but listen to me. That 5-star that you put on Apple Podcast, that's how these ratings work. That is the algorithms.
And the same thing with if you like a book by any author, go on
Amazon. Yes.
Go on Goodreads, give it a review and a few stars. Takes 5 minutes, but it means a whole lot.
And it really changes things. That's how these algorithms work. Yep. The more stars, the more comments, the more likes, things bump up. People start finding them. So make sure you do that for John. Make sure you do that for us. We're going to be back next week. Now, don't log right off on me, John. We'll talk for a moment after the show's over. But like I said, this is look, George says, great show. Thanks, Doc. Absolutely, George.
Thank you.
We'll talk soon. Now, before this show ends, we have a tradition. And like I said, this is episode 201. At the end of every episode, the guest always gets the final word. So, Doc, what is your final word?
Well, to anybody who wants to write. You can't read and write. You can't be a writer without reading and writing. And that's something that a lot of the newer generations tend to forget. Is writing a text message is not the same thing. Write a short story, work on a novel, write a journal every day, something that's a little bit more creative, and one step at a time.
All righty, folks, be sure to push your stool in. This has been a Second Front podcast presentation found on Apple, Spotify, and wherever podcasts can be found.